Well, hello everyone. You know, the next time you visit the scenic Napa Valley, it may surprise you to know it could have been far different than the internationally known wine and travel destination it's become today. You know, I think subdivisions and a bedroom community for San Francisco. You know, we're going to talk about that today with co-founder of Silver Oak Cellars, Bonny Meyer, and her new book, Perfectly Paired, The Love Affair Behind Silver Oak Cellars. We'll meet Bonny in just a moment. If you haven't already in our prior shows, I'm Andy Asher over at bloomerboomer.com, and October has been a great month as we're now doing 10 live shows a week with amazing hosts and topics and plans for expansion in the months ahead. Now, Bloomer Boomer is a diverse platform that can launch you into a full and meaningful life after 55. Boomer TV is live streamed on most social media platforms several days a week and available to watch on bloomerboomer.com. And of course, you know, I'll always ask you to like us and follow us on your favorite social media to hear more about what's coming up. And now let's go and get to Bonny Meyer with the co-founder of Silver Oaks and her new book, Perfectly Paired, The Love Affair Behind Silver Oak Cellars. Bonny, great to see you again.
Great to be with you too, Andy.
You're laughing at my introduction?
Well, I don't quite see you, but I know you're there.
Yeah, that's right. I am here. But listen, we chatted earlier in the week, and I after all the excitement out in the Napa Valley with the fires and all that, and the fact that my folks had a vineyard out there that I haven't seen in a while, and I think was close to the fire path, I said I better get out there and check it out, and I did. It was quite I was happy to see something. Many things survived okay, but disheartened that others didn't. But you, I'm sure, see it even closer than I did.
Yeah, we had two fires. One was actually around Lake Berryessa and just over the hill from where I am. And then the second fire, the most recent one, was in the middle of the valley floor. And it threatened many homes in towns, St. Helena, Calistoga, England. And it was scarier for me. It was closer to me, but also burned down some wineries, damaged some wineries, and some old inns. Now, wasn't there an older inn?
Yeah, I believe it was called the Gateway Bed and Breakfast that was literally across the street from their place that was burned to the ground.
Yeah, and Meadowwood Country Club was badly damaged and burned. What else? There was another. Oh yeah, Calistoga Ranch.
Oh, that's right.
Burned.
Yeah.
So when these places, especially places that we've known for a really long time and have many great memories being there, for me, Meadowwood would definitely be one. It's hard to see it and to think about it not being there the way we remembered, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of people were affected, and they had the same feeling about Meadowwood, and that was shocking. But, as we spoke last week or the week before, I think along with your son, you take an attitude that you're going to rebuild, and that's part of the approach to being a farmer in a way.
Well, that's right. And in life, when we have unexpected challenges and tragedies, it always leaves room for something new, a new iteration. Just like the times that we're in right now, many people are talking about the new normal or the next normal, and what do we want that to be? How do we want our lives to be? So these things all represent opportunities.
Yeah, I sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but I think in retrospect it usually does. And our topic for today is pretty amazing, really, to think about how close and just through maybe accident and good fortune and maybe some smart people out there, that the Napa Valley could have been far different than what it is today.
Yeah, speaking about opportunities, what happened is in the mid 60s, Caltrans decided that they wanted to build a very modern 4-lane freeway in the middle of the Napa Valley so that people from the Bay Area could get to Clear Lake more easily. And people who lived here, farmers and residents, said, wait a second, we don't want to be a thoroughfare for people just, coming through every weekend to go up to their vacation home. Well, that's not what we want for our home. And as it turns out, it led to galvanizing the residents to protect Napa Valley agricultural land. And it became the nation's first agricultural preserve. And this was voted in by the Board of Supervisors at the time. It was 1969 when it was formally passed. There had been a lot of conversation before that. How do we do this? What will it, people were afraid their land values would go down. So some farmers who maybe weren't doing so well were actually looking forward into the possibility of selling their land for a housing development. But the leaders at the time looked at my homeland. As it turns out, I grew up in Santa Clara Valley. And I was there in the 1950s and 60s. And I saw it go from orchards and vineyards to housing developments. And I was a kid. I didn't, think much of it, except that I noticed that these beautiful orchards were leaving. They were being torn down. And but from here, people in Napa Valley were watching that. And they said, if we don't do something radical, if we don't do something drastic, and this is what Napa Valley would be. And a little perspective on Santa Clara Valley, it was called by the Native Americans Valley of Heart's Delight. It had the most perfect climate, the most perfect soil for growing almost anything. What was there when I was a kid were apricot trees, prune trees, cherries, and grapes. There were wineries, and then lots of what we called truck farms that grew all kinds of vegetables for transport to San Francisco, the big city. And that's what I grew up with. And as farmland gets converted to subdivisions and towns, it's gone forever. It's just not borrowed. It's gone. And you can't pave with cement and asphalt. You can't pave over farmland and be able to recoup that ideal climate, ideal land, dirt, soil. That it doesn't come back. And so Napa Valley residents saw, wow, we don't want that to happen here. If that happens here, what we know, and is confirmed now, that Napa Valley, the greatest wine growing area in the United States, would be gone forever. And that's what was hanging in the balance. And it passed. It did not pass, I believe, by unanimously. There were people, again, concerned. I don't know what this will happen. There were tensions between people with different ideas. But eventually it did pass. And the mechanism they used is you needed to, if you were going to subdivide land in the Napa Valley, in the valley floor, you needed to subdivide it into parcels of not less than 20 acres, which meant you need 40 acres to cut it in two. And then in the hills, it was a 40-acre minimum. And then later, it was so successful, and people then had confidence. The growers, the wineries had confidence that they could invest in land and develop it. That those minimums got changed. So now it's a 40-acre minimum parcel on the Valley 4 and a 160-acre minimum in the hills. So isn't that remarkable, Andy, to think about what these people were doing at
Yeah,
that time?
and the foresight that it took for them to realize that there was so much more value there than a subdivision.
Right, and it really took some very visionary folks to be able to really be committed enough to fight for this against Caltrans and against the dissenters at that time. And the Napa Valley Agricultural Preserve ended up becoming the first agricultural preserve in the country, in the United States. It had never been done before.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
so that's very significant.
Yeah, and I remember my mom and dad used to worry amongst themselves that what if, the what if thing, what if they don't honor it, or what if it doesn't exist any longer? And so there was a lot of fear, but I'm sure a lot of reassurance too that at least there was that protection of their land.
That's exactly right, Andy. I remember over the years, people would say, well, it's just the county supervisors. They voted it in, they can vote it out. It's just a matter of 7 people. And someday it may be 3-4 instead of 4-3, and it will be gone. But over time, it was such a good idea that at the beginning, there were 1968, there were 23,000 acres then protected by the agricultural preserve. And today, there are 45,000 acres protected by the agricultural preserve.
So it expands with time.
Yes, the whole idea and the enthusiasm and the commitment from farmers and vintners has really led to its expansion.
Yes, indeed. And, I kind of laugh at it today because this whole concern about the land being wiped out, it was about the same time that I remember the Napa Valley wine train was being proposed to come through there. And actually, when I was out there this weekend, I just looked around to see if maybe any of the fields still had that, stop the train or whatever that little sign was everywhere. And, that was the other thing that was going on, at least in my memory, that concern about what kind of changes would take place there. You must remember, do you remember those signs?
I certainly do.
Yeah.
I was one of those people protesting.
Yeah, every little farm, you would go by, you would see one of these little signs there.
So from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to current time, there exists a tension in the Napa Valley between tourism and agricultural use and farming, or people moving in and then not liking the noise of tractors or wind machines and complaining about it. So I'm digressing from the wine train, but I'll get back there. When I pay my taxes, and every citizen in the county pays their county property taxes, on the back of the envelope, it reminds you that we're all in an agricultural area, and and people have right to farm. There is a right to farm policy in the Napa County.
Oh, fantastic. That is so
And
great. Yeah.
so you can't move in even in a legal parcel, as we know that there are a little fewer than there might have been.
Uh-huh.
You can't move in because it's really pretty place and you like having the vines nearby, and then complain about somebody cultivating the vines with their tractor.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and so yeah,
Yeah.
so there's go ahead.
Well, I was wondering, are you feeling any pressures today on growth? Is it? I'm sure it's a lot different than what it was, but that's always an issue that every community has to address now and then.
So it's ongoing, and some people. Um, okay, so growth in terms of population, the Ag Preserve has really carved out. At that time, they carved out cities and city boundaries. So the city of Napa, the city of St. Helena, what is and isn't part of those cities, and the other centers of commerce are not cities or towns, but they likewise have a border. And there's always a little bit of tension around that. The city of Napa may decide they want to expand north, and then the county says, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. No,
And
not up there. Yeah.
but there's also within the Ag Preserve a legitimate use of agricultural land are wineries,
Hmm. Oh, I
which
see.
make
Sure.
perfect logical sense. If we're going to have all these grapes, we've got to have,
The wineries.
wineries.
Yeah.
We got to put them somewhere.
Right.
And so that's a legitimate use. What's not legitimate is when 2/3 of the winery is a hospitality center,
Aha. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
right? For
Yeah.
example,
Very subtle, but yeah, that's right.
And so wait a second. If it's going to be a winery, most of the facility itself needs to be a winery. And by the way, you're going to be restricted on what you can do there. You can sell wine as part, if you make wine on your property, you can sell that wine there. If wine is made somewhere else, you can't sell that wine in your winery.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay? Otherwise, wineries would become wine shops.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you're not supposed to really be selling a lot of merchandise. Most wineries have some, and usually it's a shirt with a little logo, has the winery name, and maybe there's some cute t-shirts and a hat,
Right.
but not tableware,
Mm-hmm.
dishes, all kinds of, tourist type of items are not supposed to be sold in wineries because, again, they're supposed to be a winery, not a retail store.
Yeah. Is the wording seems there, but there's always going to be an effort probably to stretch it, and it sounds like that's what you're kind of keeping an eye on.
Right, and there are people that show up, usually not from here. They're usually from somewhere else, and they've decided that they're going to move in and create really a hospitality center disguised as a winery,
Yeah.
and they get complaints from neighbors and from vintners, and the county eventually needs to crack down on them. In other words, a winery is not supposed to be. They can serve some bread and cheese, maybe little snacks to go with your wine tasting, but they're not supposed to be serving you a 3-course meal.
Yeah.
And things like that. And there are always people who try to push the edges of that, just like there are always people who try to push the edges of just about anything.
That's right. That's right. Wow, what a great story, and I'm glad to see the survival is there, and the attitude is there, and that's can only mean a long, good life for the Napa Valley. And as always, I really appreciate it. It was fantastic, Bonnie.
Did you want to talk about the wine train for a minute?
Yeah. I'm a little bit of an. I've never even been on it, so you take it from there.
Well, that was so the wine train. It seemed like a good idea. The wine train said, "Oh, well, we'll bring wine tasters and drop them off, and we'll reduce some of the tourist traffic." But what the wineries were concerned about is that busloads of people would come from the wine train, and they'd come in and they'd taste wine, and then they would leave, and they'd taste wine, use the bathroom
Right.
facility, which was kind of limited, and
Right.
then leave and not really buy wine, because who wants to haul a case of wine under their arm,
Sure.
headed back to the wine train? And so pretty much all of the wineries were against it, and the towns were against it too. Like St. Helena, for example, they didn't have the wherewithal to and the facilities to really accommodate all of the wine train people. So the wine train, instead of being a train that kind of stopped along the way and let people off, became really a train ride, and they serve meals and on the train, and people just enjoy the ride and come back. Now, eventually, St. Helena did allow people to disembark, and so that happens today.
That's
Uh,
didn't know that's I didn't know that part of the story.
so as a protester, I had never been on the wine train,
Yeah.
but then my dad, in his last year or so of
Uh-huh.
his life, he
Yeah.
came to live with me,
Uh-huh.
and he wanted to go on the wine train,
Of course.
and so of course we did.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so for Christmas, we went on the wine train. We had a marvelous time.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What a good story. Yeah. um, well, let's see. Next week is kind of exciting. We're going to talk about how Hollywood maybe changed the future of a wine and not really the direction they want. Or maybe you have a different caption for it, but what do you think?
Well, it's certainly a great example of what Hollywood can do,
Okay.
um, intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend anyone who's listening to us right now to watch the movie again. And as I will during the week, at some point I will watch it again,
Yeah.
and then we can have a lively discussion about Sideways and what it did to the wine industry.
Good one. That's a great one. Hey, Bonnie, good to see you as always, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
But Bonny Meyer and her book, Perfectly Paired, The Love Affair Behind Silver Oak Cellars. If you like what we're doing here, please follow us and like us on your favorite social media channel and become a member of bloomerboomer.com. And until next time, so long, folks.